It's been really exciting to meet all kinds of entrepreneurs because they have a lot of things in common.
If you want to sell your business for X dollars, you construct a balance sheet and income statement of a company that's worth that much.
I'm going to introduce my esteemed colleague Elizabeth Hullings. This is the panel on best practices for senior entrepreneurs. This is our third panel, amazingly already. It's not even 12 noon yet, and we're moving right along. So Elizabeth is the daughter of painter Clark Hullings, for those of us that are in that space and genre. So she comes from strong DNA. She is a visual arts enthusiast. She helps entrepreneurs, business owners, and artists see the forests and the trees. So they're not diametrically opposed. She helps them see the forests and the trees. Imagine her optics from that particular lens. She's multilingual. She's a survivor of multiple mergers. I was reading her bio. So that means she's been downsized, right-sized, and capsized. Anybody can relate to that? Okay, all the above. And she's a survivor, homegrown, New York City, bred and born, and a leader in her own right. Let's give Elizabeth Hullings a nice round of applause.
Okay, thank you for that. Lovely introduction. I'm Elizabeth Hullings. I do business strategy, and I am running my own startup nonprofit for artists, visual artists, to help them with business. And that is really what we're here to talk about. The last panel was all about figure out how you can fit in the gig economy and do what it is you need to do and should be doing and are able to do that will sustain you in all ways. And now we're going to talk a little bit about, okay, you figured out what you think you want to do. How do you do it, right? So I would just very quickly say, well, you start immediately. Don't wait. We heard that in the last panel. Just do something. Just get started. It's not a straight line. It's never a straight line. Don't think it's going to be. You're always going to be experimenting. You're always going to realize that everything you planned out and thought you were going to do is not what you need to do at all, and you shouldn't despair. So write it all down so you can look back and say, but this is what I did do, and this is what is working, and this is why I shouldn't bother to do what I thought I was going to do, and this is why I need to talk to some of the people on this panel to get the expert advice I need to move forward appropriately, and be agile about it. So, and I'm throwing out a few buzzwords for this panel too. So agile as opposed to waterfall, the idea that you build your plan and then you execute it is a pipe dream, right? I mean, you build a plan and then when you start executing the plan, you always have to make changes to it. And if you try to stick to it, you will fail in the end. So without further ado, let me introduce the panel and I will then be quiet. So I'd like to start on the end, and I'll just go really quickly through, and then I'll let each one of them say a little bit about their perspective on once you figure out what you're going to do, how do you go about doing it in an efficacious, effective way, especially when you're starting over the age of 50, as opposed to 27 and in your basement. So we have on the end, we have Paul Tasner, who you're going to be hearing more from after this. Who is an expert in supply chain and has built various companies and is focused on I would say social business and how to do things sustainably that make you understand what you're doing is beneficial to the planet and all of the creatures on it, as well as just earning you money to put in the bank. So you can do all of those things. I hope I'm speaking properly. Almost.
Almost. I definitely have not built several companies, only one and only recently. So I certainly don't consider myself an expert, but I have learned quite a bit and I'm happy to share that.
Okay. Next we have Michael Plattner, an attorney, helps companies proceed legally and efficiently in the way they should as they go about growing. Has also got a background in building a few of his own internet-based companies, and so has a lot of background in how you go about translating an idea into a business. And then next, we have Jay, who has worked on a lot of different startups, and I read in your bio that you're focused on building, you always have to build shareholder value. That you always have to remember what's in it for the people involved in your business and why should they continue to support you. And that you run a business now called Capture Point.
I don't run it.
You built it,
I've been there for 6 years.
and other people run it.
There's a CEO that runs it.
So this is
not
the
here.
purpose of this panel. You have an idea, you start a business, you build the business, and you don't do it all yourself. We heard that in the last panel, too. So then we have Stephen Chin, who runs a company called Financial Structures and Advisory, and he works with private companies, early stage but established. And he helps them figure out how they are going to grow and continue on from a financial perspective. So the brass tacks. And then finally on the end here, not finally, but we're very happy to have also, is Dylan Gambarella, who is very focused on entrepreneurship and I would say advocacy for entrepreneurship, and coming sort of from the other end of the spectrum of the younger generation and how they're plugging into this. And, another thing that we've already heard a couple times today is needing to look at both ends, needing to look at the resources that you may have, as Matthew is saying, that are not your own generational peers, but, how can we learn from each other? So without further ado, I think I'll go back to the other end of the table and start with Paul, and if you can maybe give us your perspective on, once you've started, how do you build in an effective way?
Sure. Can you hear me? Is it? Oh, good. So I said earlier that I didn't feel like I was an expert. I really don't. I started a business 6 or 7 years ago. I'd been working guy all my life until then for the previous 40 years. Never really expected to start a business, so I didn't have the skills, all of the skills and resources that it would enable me to do that. And started a business that I felt would require quite a bit of capital to get off the ground. We were going into the manufacturing business. We were going to our business is designing and manufacturing packaging for consumer goods, and we use waste material to do it. Cellulosic waste, paper, agricultural waste. And we were going to go into the manufacturing business in California, where there were really no presence for a company like ours at that time. And it was just post-recession, so a lot of opportunities, one would think, to create a manufacturing environment, be able to hire people. It was a green manufacturing business, so you got to check off several boxes. We couldn't raise the money, and I'll get into all those details in my post-lunch speech if you're still awake. And so I don't want to cannibalize my own speech by talking too much about that. But we didn't raise any money, so we had to be very resourceful. And I think we made a lot of mistakes, but we were guided by that one overriding issue, which was we had no money. And I say we. I had a partner who was an architect and was going to help me build this manufacturing facility. But when we found we couldn't build it, she was still passionate about the business, and we decided we would outsource our manufacturing. So, I mean, that's one piece of advice I would certainly have. If you're hell-bent on manufacturing and you can't find the resources, there are lots of companies out there that make the things that you're looking to make, or could make them, and we outsourced our manufacturing to, and we have 6 partners today, and I think it was the best, it was a blessing in disguise for us. I'm so glad we did it. It's given us countless opportunities that we wouldn't have had with our own. And as my wife points out, I probably would have ended up sleeping in the plant because I just have a checklist every day of things I was worried about. The electricity, the water power, the employees. So I have none of those issues anymore. In fact, we have only gig workers to connect it to today's discussion. Myself and my business partner, Elena, are the only full-time employees. Everyone else, legal, marketing, PR, finance, everybody's a gig worker. Particularly designers. We have several designers that work for us. I think the best advice, and I've been asked this before, and the one thing I do feel comfortable about in terms of good advice is that, particularly our business, because it has such a strong environmental aspect to it, but I think this is true for almost any business. We didn't have any resources. I'm 73. I was 66 when we started our business. My partner is just a young girl of 48 or something at the time, but she looks even younger. But we had lives before this, so we had savings, fortunately, and we were able to use our savings to get our business started. But we used our savings to live on, not to put into our business. So we had very little resources to run our business. We entered business competitions. There are business competitions everywhere, all the time, on almost any subject, but there's certainly business competitions in our area regarding the environment and sustainability. We entered business competitions. They're absolutely free. If they're not, they cost $50 to send in your application. They often have cash prizes. They always have notoriety if you win or you become a finalist. There is some trade magazine, weekly, daily newspaper, whatever, that is going to write about you. And we got hooked on it. I think we became finalists the first time we tried it, or semifinalists, and we just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And fortunately, we had a good business concept and a good model, and we've won a lot of competitions. We've won a lot of money from these competitions. But more so, we've gotten incredible publicity. We've been in 65 stories in the press, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Money Magazine, and lots of small trade magazines that only 4 people read. But it's been an incredible blessing for our business, because not only do they write about you, but if they have a backlink to your website, your organic search results in Google keep going up. Nothing like having the New York Times have a link to your website. So now companies that are looking for what we do, if they search on the right terms, which are pretty easy, we come up pretty darn high. First page, second page in Google search. We don't reach out to customers anymore. They call us. I mean, it's taken 6 years, but that's the biggest advice I could give anyone, is look for competitions. Even if you've got the resources, look for competitions. That's just a wonderful way to promote your business.
What is the name of the business?
Our business is called Pulp Works. Pulp. We turn the fibrous waste into a pulp. We make packaging that resembles the egg carton is the most generic and old example of what we do. That's the most unsophisticated version of, I like to think what we do is a lot more sophisticated and elegant looking, but the egg carton is the same technology that we use. We take waste and we mold it, and that's your package.
Useful things.
Huh?
And make useful things.
Make useful things that are compostable.
So, perfect example for everyone in the room of the things that were being talked about in the last panel. How can you take things that you do and that you're good at and monetize that? Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Michael Plattner, from your, I guess your legal chair, or your, also your business startup chair, both perspectives, maybe.
Okay. Thanks for having me. So I've been an entrepreneur since I was 13 years old. And that was when I started my stereo selling company. And I sold that to my partner, who was my high school algebra teacher, when I went to college. And he couldn't afford to pay me the money that was required to buy the whole thing from me. So he gave me the part that wasn't money in the form of stereos. So I called all my family. I called my cousins, I called my uncles, my aunts, and I gave them all stereos, and I went to college. And the rest of my career, I've been practicing law for 35 years. I've spent trying to get back to the feeling I had the day that I sold that company. Because that was a pretty good feeling. And all I've done since then is work representing entrepreneurs who built companies. I represent entrepreneurs who build little companies, and I've represented entrepreneurs that have built extremely large companies and call me and say, can you be at the private jet tomorrow at 5 o'clock? And you want to say no when they say that, because that means they really own you for a long time when you are in their jet. So it's been fun, though, and it's been really exciting to meet all kinds of entrepreneurs, because they have a lot of things in common, even though you can't tell that from the outside. So in preparation for this, I thought I'd write down kind of some of the things that I've seen really work for people who wanted to start a business, even a little tiny business. So one thing, picking up on something I heard in the last panel, which was really interesting to me. If you type into your Google search, teach your kid how to pitch baseball. If you do that, the first thing that will come up on Google is a video called Teach Your Kid How to Pitch Baseball, which I created when my son was in T-ball, and we'd moved out of T-ball and we wanted to teach him how to pitch baseball. And I got a coach to teach him how to pitch baseball, and I love things that are electronic, so I videoed it, and then I put it up with those keywords on Google. It's the #1 hit on Google if you put Teach Your Kid How to Pitch Baseball. We've had 125,000 views. I've never done anything with it to make it into a business, but I've linked it to other things that I wanted to be a business, and it really hasn't been that hard to do that. So the lesson of that, picking up off the last panel, is if you've got a good idea and you can explain it in a few words, use those words. And those words are liable to be what puts you on the first page of Google when someone else comes to use those logical words. That got me interested in logical semantic word string theory, which caused me to start thinking about, well, if I could do that with this baseball site, I guess I could do it with a lot of other things. So yes, while I've practiced law for all these years, helping entrepreneurs building companies and then selling them, and then building the next one and selling them. That's pretty much what I do over and over again with these entrepreneurs. I also have not been able to keep my hands out of the business world as well. I did a little sabbatical in the year 2000, and I thought it was going to be pretty quick. It was about this internet thing again, and I came up with the idea to it'd be great if when somebody dies, that all the survivors could go online and write a message, and I have the patent on how to do that, and it's now done every day by every funeral home in the country. And the reason the patent hasn't made me rich is because you'll notice no one ever pays for it. It's just being used by everybody. And my patent is on how to dynamically generate a memorial website and get paid for it using a certificate that you get at the funeral home. But I built a business around that in my sabbatical, and while I built that business, it was okay. We became partners to like 2,000 funeral homes, but I took my idea and I put it on a laptop. I had a couple guys build it they were musicians by day and coders by night. They knew something called PHP, and they put it together. And then I took it to the head of the largest casket company in the world, Hillenbrand Industries. I found a way to get to him. You can use LinkedIn for that today. Back then I had to use a human being to get to him, but it was good. And I sat down with him and I showed it to him, and he said, gee, would you take $2 million from me to build that thing? And I said, okay. And so we started that company. And we sold it a few years later. to one of the large funeral home chains. But while we were doing that, because we were hosting all these crazy websites for everybody, we also started hosting funeral home websites. And we had so much hosting going on that we had a guy in a data center who was running our servers, and he said, you know, I got a bunch of friends who would like to use some server space. This is 2003. And so we posted, pay attention to this, we posted online on a website where server geeks hang out. We said, if you want to use time on our server, here's the URL and give us your credit card. We did that on May 30th, 2004. And 50 people gave us their credit card for $100. And I had this guy who was a great CFO at the time who was working for the funeral company. And all of a sudden, we had 50 credit cards we had to process. And we had this other guy we just hired as like his assistant. And both of them, I mean, I think we killed them. I mean, because from the day that we posted that one post on a website that was a discussion board called Web Hosting Talk, from that day, every day after that for 26 months, we got 50 more orders. We never ran an ad in anywhere, in Google or anything. At the end of 28 months, I was the CEO of a company that had 15,000 servers in 8 data centers across the world, and we were a $30 million run rate per annum recurring revenue company, and we had partners from private equity firms in New York and venture capital firms in California, and we never ran an ad. So quickly, I'll run through my top 10 list of what I've learned, because those are things that I did personally as an entrepreneur, but I'm a real lawyer. I don't just play one, and although my partners might disagree with that, I am fortunate that I somehow or another got them to believe that I could be a lawyer on top of being an entrepreneur, because I had an MBA and a law degree. And so I want to say this, that I do run the corporate M&A practice of the 9th largest firm in the United States, Lewis Brisbois, which has a fine New York office. I'm a New York lawyer. I live in Florida. We have a Florida office. We have 44 offices across the country and 1,300 lawyers. My group of corporate lawyers is only about 130 lawyers, but that's a big business too. So I like running businesses. People figured that out. Here's my quick I'll take one extra minute and give you these quickies, okay? So it's better to chase a rock than to push it. What does that mean? If you're going to start any kind of business, whatever it is, whether you're looking for $30 an hour work in the gig economy or you're going to start some kind of a business, find a business that people really need what you're going to provide. And then run after it. That's what we did in the hosting business, obviously. Later they called that cloud computing. And we didn't know that's what it was called at the time. But man, it was a hard business to go in 3 years to get all those servers put up and find the money for all that and hire the right people. That was the most exciting business experience of my life. And I compare every other business that I ever see to that experience. Are you chasing it, the rock down the hill, or are you trying to push it up the hill? If you're trying to push it up the hill, find a different business. Now, that doesn't mean don't be persistent. At the beginning, you got to do some things and figure out your path. But after a while, a good business, really, you're just figuring out how to serve people as opposed to how to sell to people. That's another way that I put it. Find a great platform, whatever the platform is, whether it's from your website, your business card, from whatever platform makes the business, in my experience. Whatever you make that platform. Create your right name and know what experience you want people to have when they encounter you in any forum. Set time benchmarks and associate with others who respect time. Time is the only thing we have no control over. It's just going out the door every minute. But we do have the ability to set benchmarks, and that is the difference between what I've seen as really effective people and those that waste your time. Use engagement letters as an agreement with your customer. Say what you're going to do. Say what you expect them to do. Make sure you've made arrangements for payment. Make sure you have a PayPal account. Use QuickBooks online. Keep track of what you're doing. it makes all the difference in the world. Consider buying a business if there's something you want to do. Sometimes it's easier to buy one and get the money to buy one than start one up. And let's see, I'll just give you one final one. I've got more of these things. But I'd say focus. When I always think about what made this guy worth $100 million and this one is failing all the time. And it's almost like they become a savant. They're so focused. I mean, that same guy who's worth $100 million, he's not well-rounded. I teach my kid, I want you to be well-rounded. And then I think, but I hope he's going to focus on something, because that well-rounded thing will really screw you up if you're too well-rounded. Eventually, you need to focus.
Thank you. Okay, so Jay. Please.
My turn.
Yeah, it's your turn.
First of all, I want to thank Dan for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure to come to these things. They're informative whether you're sitting up here or sitting out there. So I was chatting with my wife earlier in the week and aligning our schedules. I was saying what I was going to do today, and she said, "Why on earth did they invite you?" And I said, well, got a little defensive and got a little reflective, so I figured I'd take a couple minutes to answer that question. I started my business when I was 25. I was just finishing up my master's degree at NYU. It was a compact disc wholesaler. This goes back a ways, back to the days of yore with record stores, and it was a classic record industry middleman type company, a wholesaler. And I'm 25 and I'm a kid and I really don't know what I'm doing. I have a passion for music, I have a passion for business, and but I was dealing with these crusty old music industry veterans, cigar chomping, just stereotypic guys, and they were old. My God, these guys were old. They were like 45, maybe even 50. And I did that for a while, and you have to learn how to sort of talk to the people you're selling to, and we were selling to record store buyers and other record distributors. After that, I went on to work for a company called Hey Band, which maybe there are people old enough in the room who know who they are. They sell value-priced apparel to an older demographic. And when I got on board, we had kind of a wisecracking CEO, and I said, so who exactly is the demographic? He said, Jay, age 65 to dead. Okay, that's old. That's really old. They got bought. We sold it to private equity in 2006, and the new guys come in, and they're trying to establish everybody's skill set. Now, for Hey Band, I built their e-commerce business from scratch. I ran their call centers, and I ran their mail processing centers, basically every customer touch point. So if the customer was talking to us, it went through an area of my responsibility. So the new guys came in and said, oh, you're the guy that knows how to talk to old people. And I said, okay, I'll take that skill. I never really had, thought of myself as having that skill, but if they wanted to give it to me, I was happy to take it. Fast forward a couple of years to the company where I am now, CapturePoint, which is a cloud-based software business. It's a boutique business, 25 people, very casual work environment, a lot of Metallica t-shirts, interesting haircuts and tattoos. And I was chatting with one of the developers in the break room, and I, cracked a joke, and the guy said, oh, a dad joke. My dad tells me those all the time, and I realized I'm the old guy now. And I've embraced my role as sort of the grown-up in the room at this business. It's a lot of young guys up and coming, but I say all that because senior entrepreneurship, which this is a symposium on senior entrepreneurship, it's entrepreneurship. Doesn't really matter how old you are. The rules are the same for everybody. Being somebody who's been around the block a few times has its advantages, and that's something I think everyone in this room can focus on. We've all had jobs that have gotten us somehow or other to this point today, whether it's by running businesses or working on Wall Street or doing some sort of a career, and you say, God, there's got to be more to it. But you do, as, quote, entrepreneurs of a certain age, you can look back and have a long time horizon. We've all seen a couple of crashes of the stock market. We've lived through, we have 9/11 still fresh in our mind, even though it was 17 years ago. we know the difference between a change in the weather and a change in the climate. You know, the weather changes every day, but when the climate starts to change and you see that on the horizon, you know that that's action. So anyhow, I hope that answers the question as to why I'm here. That said, and again, I have sort of my tip list too. But you know, what would you do as somebody who's owning and running your own company? There are the basics. Now, Elizabeth made an interesting point about planning, and I agree with it. If you write out a detailed plan, that plan will change day after tomorrow, because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. But you have to plan. You know, you do. My approach to planning is to start at the end. What's the end game?
What's the goal?
Again, if you look at starting a business, are we going to sell it? Are we going to pass it on to our kids? Are we just going to live off the cash flow? What's the end game? And the answer is going to be different for everybody. But you take that end game and you connect the dots backwards. I want to sell the business. This is how I came to Capture Point. It was a friend of mine. We're both amateur musicians. He's a bass player. I'm a guitarist. And after rehearsal one night, we got chatting. And I said, well, what do you do? He said, in 5 years, I want to sell my business for X dollars. I said, well, that's easy. That's just a math problem. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you want to sell your business for X dollars, you construct a balance sheet and an income statement of a company that's worth that much. And then you take your earnings now and you just connect the dots backwards, because this was a company that had been in business for a while. So it had some history, and you just project forward. And he still says to this day, that was when I knew I had to work with you. He said, oh, that's just a math problem. So you do have to plan, and you do have to focus. You can't be drawn to every shiny object along the way, and you have to Elizabeth's point, you have to be able to program in opportunism. That this is the plan, we didn't know the future, here's an opportunity, here are a couple of trap doors. You have to be able to navigate, but you do have to have some sort of a plan. Pay yourself. I ran my business for 13 years, and my one regret is I didn't pay myself enough. Bake your compensation into the business, and because you can't just come in one day and say, I need to make more money, and give yourself a $100,000 a year raise, because your company's not going to be able to afford it. So pay yourself. And my final comment would be, again, those of us of a certain age, if you're starting a business, bake into it the ability to enjoy life. You know, we're not going to bootstrap and work 80 hours a week at our age. Why would you do that? Go to Wall Street. Go someplace where you're going to get paid for 80 hours. Bake in a lifestyle. Be healthy. Take care of yourself. Go running. Eat well. Travel. Enjoy your kids. And build a business that can support that kind of lifestyle.
Okay. Thank you. Stephen.
I'm up. Well, when Dan called me up and asked if I would like to participate in this panel, I immediately said yes, because Dan's a good friend, and I wanted to do whatever I can for my friends. And then once we hung up, my next thought was, what am I supposed to do? Okay. What I do professionally is pretty specialized. As Elizabeth mentioned, my focus is in providing financial advisory services to private companies, which include smaller size growth level companies. And it's pretty specialized, pretty specific, but it has quite an impact on entrepreneurs. And today, what I'd like to do is really define some issues here. The word entrepreneur actually is quite broad. It covers many different subsets. And the word gig and gig economy also is interesting in that it speaks to various things, or it does not speak clearly to various things that are very important to people who wish to start a business. In terms of the issues that are important from someone like me, if I were speaking to someone that wanted some advice, I would want to understand what it is that they are trying to achieve. In a gig economy, most people, I think, conflate an individual with a certain skill set that wants to go into market and sell that skill set, in which case, the way I look at it is a combination of marketing capability and reputation. Are you known in the marketplace? If you're not, then how do you get known? That's one aspect of the gig economy. The other is whether or not what you do is translatable and whether or not you want to build a business. Very different thing. You can be an entrepreneur, be in the gig economy, do something really well, get paid well, but that's lifestyle. You can do the same thing, but say, in 3 years' time, 2 years' time, 5 years' time, I want to have a company. That's very different. So you have to, first of all, know yourself, know your skill set, know what you want to do. As Jay said, the end game. It's very important. We're all at a particular stage in our lives, or will be, and so it's important to know where you want to be, how you want to end up. In terms of your access to resources, it's different when you're 20 or 30 versus if you're 40 or 50. So know yourself, know your resources, know what it is that you want to achieve. And then clearly you should have a plan. You have to do research. Today, research is done pretty easily. Go online, click the keys, start reading. And then, build your plan. And it is correct. No plan survives first contact. And be humble. Don't go into any situation with an ego, because you will never be right 100% of the time. No matter how good you are, how smart you are, you will just not be right 100% of the time. So take that ego out. Keep your passion, kick out the ego. In terms of other sort of words, I don't know if you call it words of wisdom, but words, the need is also for you to be able to identify people who can be helpful to you. You can call them mentors, they could be friends, they could be people that you meet in conferences. And just talk to them. Ask them their experience. If they are operating in the same space, ask for some time. You can establish some really good relationships. Some people are extremely generous. Most people are with their time when they have it to be helpful. Because I think, like myself, everyone likes to see success, and if they can be helpful in that, that's wonderful. And I speak from experience because I started my firm back in 2003, and having a background in banking since 1980, so I was banking for many years. I thought that I could start a financial advisory firm, and I knew it all. It's called hubris. I started my firm, had the necessary equipment, the computer systems, the software, business cards, all that stuff. And my first client, I remember sitting down, speaking to him, and within 10 minutes I realized I have no idea how to really give this person advice. My job is to help my client succeed. So I had to relearn the language of what I do. And that's very important. You have to speak the language that other people understand. We all talk our own talk. One of the most important things I learned was that you really have to speak to your audience. Do not speak to your audience as if they have to understand you. You have to digest everything and give it to them so that they understand you. And so that was one of the most important things. I learned that my skill set wasn't correct, my language skills was not correct, And so I had to just basically sit back and realize that, you know what, I was an arrogant ass. And it's very helpful. It was eye-opening. So now I try very hard to be humble, because I accept the fact that I do not know everything. I believe that I'm good at what I do. I have a great body of knowledge from just being in the industry all these years. But I also accept the fact that I don't know everything. And when I meet people here, I speak to people. It's a wonderful experience. I spoke for a few minutes with Elizabeth. She was very helpful. And everyone here, except I know Michael and Jay, and it's great listening to them. They're great speakers. Dylan, you're up next, so be prepared. Pressure's on. And Paul, I'm going to watch that clip, whatever, the TED clip after this. So my parting words are: know yourself, know your objectives, be humble.
Okay, thank you for that. Dylan, before you get started, because we have a massive shift here, and I want to hear your perspective on all of that, but first, I'd like to sum up for 30 seconds, because I heard each one of you say the same thing, in essence, right? Chase an opportunity, don't scrounge around and try to make something, right? But persevere. Find where your audience is. So, per the last panel, whatever social media platform they're on is the one you ought to be on, as long as it's the one you can tolerate using. So know yourself and know what you're willing to do. And listen and learn and listen and learn. And it's never a straight line. So don't be afraid to experiment, and don't be afraid to say, you know what, I don't know what I'm doing. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing it. I'm going to enter competitions now, or I'm going to try something else. Always be willing to try something else. So that's what I got in a nutshell. But so Dylan, I want to move to you, and I want to see from the other side of this, from the true entrepreneur starting out, words of wisdom that you impart to people. I want to hear what you have to say, and then maybe also I can put upon you to see your perspective on what you just heard.
Well, thank you again so much for having me. I'm Dylan Gambardella, and Dan and I met, I'd say about a few months ago when he came to one of our events. But before that, it's nice to be the eldest member of the panel. It's, I won't pretend to act like I have the experience and wisdom of these guys, and I don't know if you've seen me, I'm taking notes left and right here, learning myself. It's a really great opportunity to be able to sit next to these four gentlemen and be with you all here today. So I hope I can provide a little bit of a different glimmer into what being a 22-year-old is like in 2018. Turning 23, so I'm coming. Don't wait. But my story first. So I started in the world of business by accident. When I was 17, I was applying to colleges, and I had some success. I attended Duke University, got into some good schools on that list, and people took notice, and they started asking if I could look at their friends or their son or daughter's application, check out their essays, see what's going on, if I could offer a glimmer of advice. And I realized quickly after maybe the third or fourth essay I was looking at that there might be a business here. And I hooked up with a friend of mine, Justin, who is my partner. Sick today, was supposed to be on the panel, but he'll get me instead. I promise I'm the better looking partner. He and I were working on essays, and we charged $500 to look at your essay. Everyone else was charging maybe $5,000, and we thought we did a good job. Probably didn't. But before we knew it, we had a list of about 100 counselors at every school on that USA Today top 20 list, top 100 list, excuse me. And we would find the high school student and ask where you wanted to apply. You applying to Duke? We'll hook you up with a counselor at Duke. This was when we were 17, 18, seniors in high school. And we started going to events. We were making some money and living life. We thought this was the coolest thing in the world. Everywhere we went, though, it was honestly not to crap on this event, but everyone was much older than us. And we wanted to meet other people like us. And I think that's why events like this are so important, because you can surround yourself with folks in your community that you want to be meeting, that you can learn from, and more importantly, learn with. So we started going to all these conferences, all these different networking events, and when we were the youngest one at the millennial networking events, we decided it was time start our own, honestly. And that's where Next Gen came about. And today, we are about 3.5 years in, running the largest community of early stage entrepreneurs. We've got about 5,000 companies in our network. We host events. We are on the heels of our June conference, where we had just about 900 attendees. And these are all folks who don't want the typical lifestyle. Don't want the, I'm gonna work 9 to 5 until I'm 70, retire, move to Florida. No offense, Florida, great state, Michael, on the left. There's a lot of good there. A lot of good there. But I think our community members who are 22, 23, 24, maybe just out of college, they want a little bit more. And a mentor of mine told me a few years ago that there are 3 things that fuel people. Right? It's fame, they want to be on the cover of the magazine. It's fortune, they want to make enough money to buy the magazine, shout out to Mark Benioff, or they want to make an impact. And those 3 things, every single thing in life boils down to one of those 3. And I thought that was really important because I went down to our community and I tried to look at where they're motivated. And there's a lot of that impact in a way that maybe wasn't as prominent in generations past. And so I think it's about finding the perfect balance. How do we make a business that is going to make me money, right? Allow me to live the life I want to live, but also make the world a better place. And that's why listening to these 4 gentlemen and what they're doing and how they're doing it has been so impactful, because they figured that out obviously long before I did, and they've been doing it for some time now. But our goal is to help these entrepreneurs along their mission. Right? So I have the best job in the world. I get to meet some of the coolest young people in the world who honestly make me feel old. When you talk to a 15-year-old who's starting that new app, I'm like, geez, right? I'm 22 and I'm old. I'm washed up now. I can't make those cool magazines. But no, I'd say that, and I want to be a different voice. I want to be somebody who can add to the conversation here. So summing up a little bit that everyone spoke about, the number one most important thing for me has been focusing. There's so much you can do, right? And I say that at 22, there's so much that everyone here can do. You have a lifetime of experience, and the skills you have, the network you've curated and created, that's so crucial. And I would really want to say that when you do take that jump into running a business, buying a business, whatever it is, make sure that you pick the one thing you're gonna be the best at. What are you gonna do differently? At NextGen, with this community of thousands of companies in our network, we wanted to do it all. We wanted to invest, we wanted to host events, we wanted to run this online platform. We really had to pick the one thing we're gonna be the best at. And we said, you know what, we're gonna sacrifice. That opportunity cost is real. As an economics major at Duke, I learned about that term quite well. But we're gonna pause those ideas, right? We're gonna focus on this one, we're gonna do it and do it well. And we'll come back to those one day when the timing is appropriate. But focus has been the most important thing for me, and it's been the reason of almost every failure, but it's also been the reason for the few and far between successes that we've had, which has been really exciting for us. Looking down, I would just say also high level, before you take the jump and maybe commit the money, commit the time, leave your job, whatever it is, educate yourself. There's so many resources, so many tools out there that can make your life easier. Talk about automation. Right? We've got really good this year on operations. So everything that happens, we want to do it as efficiently as possible. Make sure that if there's 2 team members working on it, can one do it with some software, with some help? The answer is yes, we're doing it 10 out of 10 times. So make sure that you are ready for what's out there before you go through. And I love what you said, Jay, about the life cycle, looking at from start to finish or finish to start more appropriately, and see those challenges that are coming and prepare for them accordingly. But also, on a high note, I'll leave you, prepare for the success too. If it works, you want to be ready, and you want to know what that means, right? For us, if we have the goal of hitting 10,000 community members maybe by 2020, right? If we hit that, how are we going to work with them? Right? Are we prepared to manage them, to help them the same way we're prepared to help 2,000 today? So it's interesting to think about that way, but I don't know that people do enough of that preparation. Right? You're always talking about the road bumps that are out there. On the flip side, be ready for when you make it big and you're the next big thing. So I'll end it there, but really a pleasure to be with you all today here.
Thank you. So do we have any questions in the room? Yes.
So, Dylan,
Yes.
I'm curious to know, I do this conference called the Boom Conference, and it's for people 45 plus who might be interested in starting a business or a gig or something like that.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that comes across is this whole fear issue and helping them with fear. I'm wondering, in your community, are you experiencing fear, or what is the biggest issue that you're confronting?
Great question. So the question for everyone else, are we confronting fear in our community? And if not, maybe what is the larger fear or what is the larger concern that folks have, right? That's definitely a large part of it. When you are 22, I'm lucky to say that my parents were able to allow me not to have student loans when I graduated. And I want to start with that because that is not the case for a lot of people, young folks leaving higher education today. So that was the biggest check mark for me was I had this safety net. I was a founder my freshman year, my first year at Duke. If I screwed up, if I failed, it was okay. I had this degree I could lean back on. So that is, I think, the biggest safety net, right? So that took care of a lot of my fear. Flash forward, I graduated about a year ago now, and I got to pay the bills, right? I got to do all this stuff. I got to worry about, I'm saving on parents' health care, so that's nice. But I got to pay for my apartment. I got to buy my groceries. Right? This is real now. So I think for a lot of our founders, especially the younger folks who are really right at the cusp of entering the real world, if you will, that's a big thing. That's a massive, massive, massive thing. And what we are able to provide is the community to let you know that you're in it with a group, or you have your tribe here. And that's what this is, right? That's what everyone here today is a part of. You don't want to go through these late nights by yourself. Right? My first year running this organization, it was being up at 3 a.m. to talk to that 18-year-old who was worried about taking a gap year from college or continuing on with the business idea. I was more or less a psychologist, right? I was given that encouragement. And that's what community is about to me, right? It's there to pick you up when you fall, there to celebrate your wins too. So I'd say that is definitely one of the largest, in addition to resources, of course. We, as young people, don't have necessarily a lot of the resources that you all have today. We don't have the financial aspects. We got to go convince some elder investors down here to give us that money, right? That's a challenge, and that prevents a lot of good ideas from getting off the ground. But it's, end of the day, I think that fear is what you need, right, to keep you going, to get through those times.
So what I'm hearing is, remember that the younger generation who is not afraid to go online and figure out what Upworks is, they're terrified because they don't know how to run their lives.
Yeah.
So just remember that, because it's the same visceral feeling. Everybody has it. It's just, takes a different form at different points in your life. Yes.
Yes, hi, another question for Dylan. I work primarily with your age group, and the impact of social media, I mean, having that as a comparative format. And, can you talk a little bit about how that plays into it,
Yeah.
and in terms of
Most certainly.
your perspective?
Well, certainly. The question is about how social media really plays into my role and maybe the larger idea of being an entrepreneur.
And also the aspect of fear.
And the aspect of fear, I love that. I'm going to start there then. I think today when you go to an entrepreneurial website, where you go to Inc. Magazine, Entrepreneur Mag, whatever, Forbes, you only read about the success stories. And you hear about that 18-year-old who had this app, dropped out of school, is now worth $1 billion, and we call him Mark Zuckerberg. That guides a lot of young people into the journey of being a business owner. And I think not even young people, all people, where you hear those success stories. And what you don't see is the struggle. Facebook, I'm not posting about that crappy day I had. I'm not posting about the investor meeting that was a no. I'm posting about we closed our seed round. We are talking about this major partnership. That's what I'm posting about. I'm LinkedIn sharing our partnership with Capital One, not the 500 that said no to me. Right? And that is a really daunting idea. I think it's on everyone to not be a part of that. Right? So at NextGen, we try to encourage the vulnerability, encourage people to be real. But as a business manager, how do you deal with that? You can't start posting about your struggles and no one's going to come to your site, right? I think consumers today, especially young people, they want to trust in and believe in the values of a brand. They don't want to necessarily go for the big box company anymore because that company maybe is outsourcing work in a way that is harming workers in another country abroad. Right? They want to know that they're believing in something. So take advantage of that. Share that. If that's your company, if that's your work, share those qualities and those characteristics and make them work for you instead of against you.
And share your process.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard that from everyone else on this panel too. It's like, we tried this, we tried that, we tried the other thing, and it's okay if one thing didn't work out. Maybe you want to wait until you have something that is working out, and you can say, we tried that, it didn't work, and now we're doing this, so it's positive, but share the process. Does someone have a question for other than Dylan?
Thank you. Thank you all, by the way. This is an excellent panel. I don't know who chose you guys, but. So, and by the way, Jay, we asked you on the panel because we know you know how to speak to old people, so that's.
Right.
But one of our 900+ advisors, when he retired from his last position recently, came up with the idea of a angel investment club, which he saw how we had a lot of very sharp young people on the advisory board, and then the older people with more experience, more money to invest, more risk tolerance, and so we try to match them, and we've had a couple of panels doing that, and that's basically the basis for this little Fox Club idea, is to create a opportunity for cross-generational interaction. And actually, Jay Bainey, in disclosure, helped us write our business plan, the original one, but that's changed since then, because
Yes.
we wanted to do a concierge service to help our older advisors get jobs as consultants. But we realized that our client base would be the 1% who could afford that, so we said, we want to create more of a community like Dylan and Justin have been doing, and it's an amazing community, by the way. I went to their summit, and is it open to people, and I'm not supposed to ask you, but.
question I
It's open to everybody, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
great. But to everybody on the panel, starting with Paul, do you think that, and this has always been a question of mine, based on the prior two panels, do you think everybody could be an entrepreneur, or does it take a certain sort of instinct, character, skill set, or could you just, figure out what your passion is and what your contribution might be? Can anybody be an entrepreneur, or, because statistics say that 67%, the statistics I've read, of senior entrepreneurs are successful, whereas only 27%, and you probably correct me if I'm wrong, of general entrepreneurs are successful. So, but could anybody be an entrepreneur? Because I don't think so.
Well, nor do I. I'm still trying to get it right. I don't even know if I can answer affirmatively about myself. I mean, my business partner, quite frankly, is a great support, and I love her dearly, but I would not call her an entrepreneur. She's painfully shy. I mean, she has an enormous number of talents that benefit our business, but I don't think she'd probably be the first to admit it as well. I don't think she's got the kind of mindset and passion that you need.
Same question, of course.
No, not everybody can be an entrepreneur, but I'd say that the characteristic more than anything else that I think the entrepreneurs have that I've known that seem to have done well is they just are not afraid to do anything at the end of the day to what had to be done. I mean, whether it was figure out how to make the QuickBooks work, figure out how to send an invoice out, figure out how to solve some other problem at the end of the day, that's probably the key attribute. And I know a lot of really talented people that, they would look at some of those types of tasks and just throw their hands up and say, I just can't do that. And that's, I think, the difference.
I would also say no. What characterizes entrepreneurs is their risk tolerance and their ability to bounce back after failure. I mean, show me an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, and I'll show you someone who's failed multiple times. And not everybody's up for that. Not everyone can take the rejection. To Justin's point, like, how many people do you meet with asking for money or investing and saying no? The successful entrepreneur says, I only need to make one sale. But you have to have a high risk tolerance, and you have to be able to bounce back from failure.
Stephen, what do you think?
I
like the word diversity, because I agree, not everyone can be an entrepreneur. They're not geared for it. They may not have the right tool set, background, whatever the reason is. But the flip side is not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there who enjoy working in organizations, for organizations, and they contribute greatly from that position.
Where would the entrepreneurs be without them, right?
Right, exactly. To Paul's point,
Trying to do it alone.
Dylan?
and the one thing I'll just add there, and I agree that not everybody is destined to be an entrepreneur. There are times and places when the same person may be more entrepreneurial and then may not, when it's more appropriate to be and when it's not. When I'm 28 years old in college, heck yeah, go be an entrepreneur. When I'm 35 with 2 kids, I don't know, for goodness, can't even imagine. Maybe not, right? So there's time and place, I would like to think.
And would you agree there's room in the gig economy, which it's here, it's our future. Not everybody who's successful in that has to be entrepreneurial. Or would you disagree with that? For whoever on the panel. How does that?
I was going to say, there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and being self-employed.
Yes.
You know, they share many attributes, but if you're self-employed, you still have to have, it's a risky move. You have to be driven, you have to be focused, you have to be honest with yourself, but you can do that without having the goal of building a company that has increasing value that you're going to sell. You know, in the gig economy, that's just what it is. You get one gig and then you finish that and you get another gig and you finish that. You can stitch together a pretty good lifestyle. You're independent, you're not working for the man. You know, so, but there's a difference, I think, between being an entrepreneur and being self-employed.
Okay, last one.
Obviously, this is random selection of successful people, but what strikes me is the lack of representation. So I think that's also reflective of the real world. Women may more likely tend to self-exclude from entrepreneurship. So what do you see as the gap, and what would be something that you'd recommend women to step into so they can have just as big of a success as you do?
I don't think it's going to be an answer that satisfies you, but I just had an experience. My oldest daughter lives here in New York, and she recently entered the gig economy after a successful career in journalism, working for a number of magazines, and she commented in a group setting that. I don't know if it was tongue-in-cheek or maybe slightly tongue-in-cheek, but she said now that she was an entrepreneur, and she has assignments, freelance assignments, I would say. Now that she's an entrepreneur, and my grandson, 13 years old, said, "You're not an entrepreneur. Poppy's an entrepreneur. You're not." So I thought that was pretty interesting that he sort of sensed the difference between having projects versus not. So anyway, I know that didn't satisfy you. I'm sorry. In fact, it just made it worse, didn't it?
In terms of, female entrepreneurship and more diverse entrepreneurship, I think that's what you're asking. Access to capital. I mean, historically, the purse strings have been held by white men. The VC community, private equity community, that's it. So they very naturally, instinctively are going to give money to the next guy who's kind of like them. So it's changing. It's very definitely changing. But I'm interested in Dylan's perspective on that. Like, are you seeing it change?
Yeah, most certainly. And I completely agree that it's the example we set that influences the next 10 entrepreneurs that are going to enter, whether they are male, female, black, white, doesn't matter. We at NextGen noticed that our first year, I think we had maybe 18% female attendance at our first event back in 2014. And I'm very proud to say that this year we had 41% female attendance, and that's a major goal of ours, is to get to 50-50 sooner than later. We recruit female entrepreneurs. We haven't done enough until we're 60-40 female favoring. I think allowing the voice to be heard at the table is big. So having a speaker be a female keynote, having a female founder come in and lead one of our live webinars, right? Letting other women out there know that this is for you too. Right? This is a game that you should be playing in. Our first hire was the most incredible, brilliant woman I've ever met. And she then led us to the next 3 hires who have all been incredible, amazing women. And that has transformed our company. And so I think having their voices at the table, my partner and I were 2 white dudes, right? We can only add so much. I think we're smart, relatively speaking. But at the end of the day, we need that diversity, as you said, to allow us to grow and to expose us to new ideas.
We are way over on time, but as the woman standing up here, I would beg for 30 seconds to say that. I saw David Letterman interview Tina Fey recently, and she said, they were talking about the writer's room at Saturday Night Live, and she said that every week they would sit around and everybody would bring their ideas to the table, and it was a very democratic process, whoever had the best idea. Except there's one woman who, they were talking about Classic Coke, and one woman writer had an idea for Classic Kotex as a joke commercial. And all of the other male writers in the room said, well, I don't get it. That's not funny. I don't get it. And finally, when there were 3 female writers in the room who cracked up and fell on the floor because it was so damn funny, they went with it. So it was a democratic process. No one was trying to subvert that. It's just, if you don't have the representation in the room, then you're not going to understand your audience. So let me bring it back around to that, because that's what I heard everybody say. Who are you selling this thing to? And why do they care? It's not about you, it's about them. So, thank you, everybody.